Hi, I'm Ron Coleman with Tzvi Waldman and Jeff Ballabon, known as Ballabon to the entire world. Uh, we're three Orthodox Jewish guys from, I wouldn't say the broadest possible spectrum of the community, but different spots. And we want to talk about how this election, based on our experience as Republicans who are Orthodox Jews who are Republicans, how we look at this election, and we think people need to focus on in our community, and maybe to change some perceptions about what is really the realistic approach, what is really the pragmatic approach. I will start by introducing myself. I'm Ron Coleman. I'm of counsel to the Dillon Law Group. I was formerly a partner in this firm, which is led by Harmeet Dillon, the well-known member of the Republican National Committee. I'm speaking to you from the New York area. I'm in Newark right now. I have been active as an attorney for the Trump campaign. I'm a litigator. I do a lot of free speech work. I do a certain amount of political work, but I have been an active Republican and conservative for many years, and also as a contributor to the efforts of Agudas Yisrael, mostly on the legal side. I attended Princeton University, Northwestern University, Esha Torah, and Mesivta Rabbeinu Chaim Berlin. Tzvi, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Tzvi Waldman, born and raised in Brooklyn.
You said Brooklyn, I should have said Passaic. Okay.
I'm the founder of New York State Jewish Gun Club. I also run the non-for-profit United Jewish Gun Coalition. It's a 501c3 that advocates Jewish gun rights and the right to self-defense. I became the vice chairman of the Ramapo GOP. It's a area in New York 17 that probably has one of the highest population of Orthodox Jewish votes.
Rockland County is just to the west of Westchester County. It's on the left side of the Hudson, the Jersey side.
And it's extremely important. I went to Hasidic yeshivas, and I try to do good things for the right reasons.
Jeff?
My name is Jeff Ballabon. Grew up in Queens, spent some time in Brooklyn, spent some time, now I'm in the Five Towns because, if we're all going to be stereotypes, I'm going to be that stereotype. But I do split my time, spend about half the time now in Eretz Yisrael for the last few years. So split my time between here and Jerusalem, for those who are watching who are not part of the community. My education includes both traditional yeshivas growing up and a more yeshiva-based medrash called track kind of learning, Yale Law School, then worked on Capitol Hill as counsel to a Senate committee, Commerce, Science, and Transportation, as well as to a senator. Also, I've worked in media. I was the head of chief spokesman for the CBS News. And actually, I've worked with both Ron and Tzvi at various times on a lot of different projects. Ron on some Aguda projects and some other projects. Tzvi on some of the gun projects. My main client now that I'm in Israel for is actually the Christian group, the American Center for Law and Justice. And it's a Christian law firm that is extremely pro-Israel, but also because it's pro-Jewish. So we represent a great many institutions on fights at home, synagogues, shuls with zoning issues or schools with zoning issues. If people are being, if there's anti-Semitic abuse in employment or in schools. And so it's a nonprofit organization, and they're the ones who I work for in Israel.
So to a lot of Orthodox Jews, Christian just means not Jewish. But what Jeff means to say, I will take the liberty of saying, and Jeff is one of the most articulate people I know, but I want to clarify this. This is an affirmatively Christian and an evangelical mode law firm. And what we have found in our experience is that the best friends traditional Jews have politically in this country are not unaffiliated Jews. I say we, I mean the Orthodox Jewish community. It's not unaffiliated Jews. It's not the world of Jewish organizations. It's not the Zionists as such. It's evangelical Christians.
Yeah, sure. That's a great segue into our main topic tonight. The reason I work with this firm, we started working years ago on a number of projects related to religious liberties in America, and we got to know each other because they have the numbers. We, in our community, we are a religious minority, a faith minority, and the kind of America we want to live in very much looks like the kind of America they want to live in, and many of them grew up in. And that's changed drastically over the past couple of decades. It's more than a nominally Christian firm. It's my colleagues there are Christian lawyers and others who get involved in policy and politics. And by the way, there are branches in Europe and around the world. But for example, we've had situations where Hasidic Rebbes have needed help, and we've stepped in, and all the work we do is pro bono. We never charge any money for this. And so, or there was a case that was very famous not that long ago with antisemitism against Jewish travelers. And so we represented those travelers. And so because the core principles of this firm have to do with defending religious liberty and freedom, because they have the numbers, that is the place where I have chosen to work. Yes, as Ron says, we can make policy with this law firm nationally and internationally because of the numbers, and they have more insight into us. And one other thing is they're very active in media, and that's very important as well. For example, right now in Israel, in Eretz Israel, it's very important that they hear a message, and that's some of what I do from Jerusalem. But yes, as Ron says, by far, that is the population which is the most supportive of Jews. And let me just also add why, because I grew up like everyone else in the Frum community, not understanding why some Christians seem so supportive of Jews. And there's a lot of anxiety and fear and distrust as a result of that. And I would say that's been my observation now for decades, that the core underlying reason is because they also look at a biblical verse as a source. And that verse is Genesis 12:3, where God says to Abraham, or Hashem says to Avram, right, that he will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. Okay, and so they want those blessings. It's also a moral dynamic. They look at the Jewish people and see immorality. And finally, there's a recognition that the people who founded the United States of America, unlike the Christian countries in Europe, the people from the United States of America came here running from that Europe to create a more tolerant environment based on what they call a Judeo-Christian model. Now, that's alien to us in our community, but Judeo-Christian means to them that there's a set of ideas that links our Torah or their version of it, the Old Testament, to their belief system, and in that the Jews play a very important role, and that we are God's children, we should be protected, and our notion of being an Orla Goyim or a Mamlechas Kainim, Gai Kadosh, that they think that that's what we're supposed to be doing also.
Right. So locally, at the end of the day, what people want is normalcy. And what normalcy means is true family values. They want to have healthy children, normal children. They want to have good schools. And they realize that with the current policies, they're not having it. They look at us, and yes, there are some that were not supportive of our efforts, but they're at the crossroads, and they see that they need to do something. When the lockdowns happened during COVID, and there was a particular community in Williamsburg, they made a funeral, and the governor tweeted about it. It became like a whole thing on Twitter, and it blew up. They were like, that actually activated us to get involved and like litigate other cases around the nation. And he was like, where are you? Like why don't I see more of you around here, like, helping us and encouraging us and giving us guidance? And if you take that back to the local level, it's the same thing. When I meet people at political events from the other community, people yearn normalcy. And normalcy is not that complicated. They want truth. And this is something that, because we have a Torah, because our way of life, we have a system that forces us towards normalcy, and they look at it as a thing that they want to be part of. So I think we have a lot of people with whom we can unite and do positive changes.
One thing that Tzvi and Jeff and I are not going to talk about is whether Donald Trump is an anti-Semite. Okay, it's such a preposterous and libelous claim. There are a million other places you can go for that, and for a small fee, I'll be happy to do a solo one, standing on my head and spitting wooden nickels, okay? That's not part of this presentation. What I've always said, and I didn't mention, I'm very active on social media. I've got a ridiculously large, for someone who really should have a real job, account on X, what they used to call Twitter. One of the points I'm always making is Donald Trump is only a conservative because of what has happened to the rest of the world. And what I'm always describing Donald Trump as is ideologically, a regular person. What used to pass for a normal, regular person? Hey, borders, countries have borders. You should have to ask permission to go through a border. That used to be an unremarkable point of view. people who commit crimes, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of the political motivation, should be prosecuted and punished. Anti-Semitism, if there's an issue, if anti-Semitism is an issue in this country,
there is anti-Semitism knows no political party, okay? And anti-Semitism knows no right or left. Anti-Semitism is its own machla, its own sickness, okay? The problem is that it's when it becomes moved from where it's stigmatized and left on the fringe as crazy, and it becomes normalized. So the Democrats did that already. It's now normalized. It's now the norm, even though they don't say we hate Jews. They come close. They use every other, in the old days, there are all kinds of ways to say it without saying it. It's bankers, it's global. Now it's Zionists. Just, you're still a Zionist by them because it just means a Jew when they hate it. But we have a problem in the Republican Party also. And when you said,
right,
we're Republicans here, I think of myself more as an independent, but right now, if I'm anything, I'm anti-Democrat, not because the Democratic base is so evil, but because the leadership has completely normalized Jew hatred. It's now normal. There is a risk of it being normalized. There is a risk of being normalized in the Republican Party. Actually, there's some places in New York where we've seen it being normalized within the Republican Party. However,
and those places are not far from where Tzvi lives.
Correct. However, between the two parties, the Republican Party has consistently, if not in every case, but regularly called out anti-Semites in their midst. They've actually done something which Democrats, as far as I know, have never done. The RNC, the Republican National Committee, has officially put out resolutions saying to not vote for or support certain people who were running as Republicans. They couldn't stop them legally, but said don't support them because of their anti-Semitism, something the Democrats have never done as far as I know. All right. And so it's largely kept in the fringe. There are some voices that are still troubling and still problematic. But here's a perfect example. A huge influencer until very recently was Candace Owens. She was clearly associated with the Republican team and with the Trump team. And she's been basically tossed out completely, right? Rejected completely, which of course she blames the Jews for, because she just went nuts on the anti-Semitic front. There are others who I think still pose problems who are close to power, but I don't think they're as obvious. And I think that people don't really recognize we are hypersensitive. So I just want to say this. It is a problem across the board.
You're right.
One side
but it's the normalization, though, and the acceptance of it. Right. That's critical. And you look at what's happened in institutions, especially in the New York area. But let's again, beyond the scope of this discussion is what's going on in academia. The three of us, and this is Ron Coleman here with the Ivy League, and Jeff with his Ivy League degree. Stay away. That's over. American Jews. We don't have to tell this to Tzvi's community. That's over. But Tzvi, this is all very nice, this ideology, but isn't it true that if you got to pay to play, that if you want to play ball, if the Jews are going to have influence in the governments in one-party states like New York and New Jersey, they have to be Democrats. They've got to support Democrats. How do you answer that?
Look, I think it segues in from the press conversation that you just had about anti-Semitism, right?
That's why
the area where I live had a history, with the GOP. And one of the main reasons that I got in, and one of my main missions, is to bridge that gap. And there have been many people that have constantly in the past been active on Facebook, spewing different things. And after a couple of 10, 15-minute conversations here and there at events, they completely understand us, and they stop and they realize that if they ever want to get out of this mess, they need to work with us. And they were shocked when we spoke how much our values align. And the little issues that do come up that divided us are most of the time issues created by the democratic policies designed to divide us.
So let's talk about that more specifically, Jeff.
That is a great segue. So I want to actually, when we first decided to have this conversation, it was triggered by recent events and by the upcoming election. So I want to sort of focus in on a very tachlis, a very practical situation right now, which is to say the From Jewish vote is different than the rest of the Jewish vote, very conspicuously different. And yet, until the 2004 election, there was just one Jewish vote. And there's still a drumbeat in the secular anti-Jewish media and the leftist media to claim, oh, there's, the Jewish vote, in which...
And by the way, the anti-Jewish media, significantly controlled by Jews. Okay. We don't deny that. We know it. We know it.
That's right. Okay. And for a long time, and this also goes to Ron's question, if you're in a one-party state and you want to play, or in a state that is heavily, or an area heavily shouldn't, you want to play in primaries, things like that. Let's talk about what political power really can be. And so I've done a number of presidential campaigns. I've been a Trump campaign advisor. I realized the Jewish campaign is just really, it's like some national group. Usually it's a group like AIPAC or the Republican Jewish Coalition on the Republican side. And they basically outsource the message. Well, neither the Republican Jewish Coalition nor AIPAC really speaks to our community. That's the truth. And it doesn't really speak to our concerns. In fact, it's another conversation whether they even speak for the concerns they claim to speak for. But these are all massive businesses that raise massive amounts of money from the Jewish community. And so their focus is on what to say to the people to write the checks. Okay. That is not the same thing as having power. So what we saw was that, and something which came to fruition, it became real in 2022 in the most recent elections. Let's take a look at that election. What we saw was that there's another Jewish vote, an actual Jewish vote, meaning ideally, if you wanted to have power, you'd be a split, a third. A third Jews would be voting consistently Republican, so you'd have some SWAT with the base and be involved. The third consistently Democrats, you'd have SWAT with the base, and then and then a third would be swing voters, and they'd go based on every election, a very sophisticated analysis of who do you want to see in control of the legislative bodies and of the White House, right? And because control matters, your local congressman does not matter at all. I say someone who used to work in the Senate, used to work, right? They just don't matter. What matters is leadership, and what matters is therefore basically control is the numbers. So what happened in 2022? Well, everyone knew, every political pundit, everybody knew, all the pollsters, that the Republicans were going to have a huge red wave. Didn't happen, right? That because Biden was not a very successful president, even already at the beginning. And things were much, much worse than they were under Trump for people economically, in terms of crime, et cetera, et cetera. The wokeness was showing, well, the abnormalcy was showing. And so everyone expected this, and it didn't happen. And yet there was one footnote. Okay, so the Republicans didn't do well in the Senate, didn't do well elsewhere, but somehow they ended up with a 4-seat majority in the House of Representatives. Okay, well, here's my story. A few weeks before the election, I wake up and I see the news that the New York Times is once again doing a hit piece on Haredi education, on ultra-Orthodox, as we'll call it, Jewish education. All right, it was an ongoing, really, honestly disgusting set of smear attacks on this community's education. And they've been doing this for a little while. All of a sudden, they did it a few weeks before the election. I called a friend of mine who's involved in one of the local races, or Zeldin's race, actually, for governor. So what is happening here? Why would they do this now? We don't know. It seems nuts to us, maybe. And sure enough, the result of this thing just a few weeks before was a huge surge of Haredi voters, of ultra-Orthodox voters in certain key seats in New York. And at least 2 of them, just the ultra-Orthodox voters flipped those seats from deep blue to red, from Democrat to Republican. To others, a substantial number of the voters that flipped from usually being a Democratic voter to a Republican voter changed also. And all of a sudden, there was 4 seats that flipped. Guess what? The Republicans took the House by 4 seats. Okay, these seats that had been Democrat before and flipped. Now, Tzvi actually worked closely with the people involved in one of those seats for sure. So the question is, that happened in 2020. So all of a sudden, not the Jews, this subset of Jews, right? Not even just Orthodox Jews, this subset of a subset of Jews, right? Ultra-Orthodox Jews, because of their concern, was attacked, all of a sudden changed the dynamic of the House of Representatives. Well, why does that matter? For example, and by the way, why were they Democrats to begin with? We're going to address in a minute. For example, just today, a report came out from the House, the Education Committee, about all of their conclusions and all the work they've done on anti-Semitism in American higher education. Now, granted, most Haredim don't have kids in American Ivy League or in higher education in general, although there is some, right? It still doesn't matter. The normalization of Jew hatred is coming from places like that, and it is absolutely affecting us on the streets everywhere we live. Okay, so and we should care about this as general as a principle. None of this work would have happened. The House would never have looked into this, would never monitor this, never had those hearings with Lee Stefanik calling those universities, had it not been that those 4 seats had flipped from Democrat to Republican and given control. That's what's so important. Let us set aside the presidency right now. We have an election where in 2022, for the first time, Orthodox Jews made the difference nationally as to who controlled the House of Representatives, had a huge impact on us. Not just on the anti-Semitism, all the excesses of the Democrats on every social issue they were curbed. Their relationship with Israel were curbed because this happened. So the question is, what's going to happen in 2022? Well, we already lost one of those seats in a special election. It flipped back, right? So the general thought has been, well, we support the Democrats locally because they're more likely to write checks to our institutions. And we need those institutions. We need those educational institutions. And we've given up essentially on school choice and real parental rights and freedom to choose where we educate our kids over to the people who take our money massively, and then they dole it out in order to take control of votes. That's what's happened, okay? And that is what I call that blood money, honestly. It's when we get that money for our communities, it's even though we have askanim, which is a word that means people who interact with the government, activists, for lack of a better word. We have activists in the community who think that the big success is when the Democratic legislature, state or federal, will write a check to us. Honestly, it's a disaster for us because it is inherent in human nature that once that money happens, we will build our lives around it. We'll think that we need it. Once we need it, we're hooked and we have to keep on voting for them. And when they can, as we've seen, they will turn on us and destroy our way of life because that's what they want to do.
Well, Jeff, I mean, you are, according to, I don't remember whether it was the Forward or one of those hip Jewish publications.
So obviously, what it means that I'm the architect or the creator of the Jewish vote, obviously the Orthodox Jewish vote, the Orthodox Jews vote the way they vote. And while I've been involved in some outreach at various times and hoped that it was successful, I didn't create a Jewish vote. What I did was, which is true, was help create an awareness in the media and in Washington, where it was very important because I was actually sitting and I was listening to a Republican congressman after a particularly bad result. And he said something using words that are very bad words about the Jews. And he said, they don't vote for us. Why should we support you? Okay. Why should we support you?
Words along the lines of what James Baker said in 88?
Yeah. Very much
92.
Correct. Very much along those lines. And by the way, the Democrats have the reverse, which is, I'll use more clean language. Who cares about them? They vote for us anyway. He's saying, who cares if they don't vote for us? Why do we care? And I realized that was a perception. And the perception is because, again, we're a footnote, right? And so it became important for me to show that actually, no. There's, we have a problem with the word Jew means too many different things at the same time. So, there are a lot of people in this country. There used to be an Irish vote. People voted based on Irish issues, if they're from Ireland or if that's their heritage. But decades ago, it was realized that not really so much anymore. They basically assimilated so that they vote the same way other non-minorities do in their zip code. All right, based on their income and their education and where they live, they vote the same way, so they're not a vote. However, they're still an active Catholic vote. Now, many of those Catholics are Irish. Okay, so while there's no Irish vote as a Catholic, the world uses the same word for our ethnicity as for our religion. So Jew means Irish and Jew means Catholic. So let's now divide it. What I would call the Jewish Irish vote, which is the ethnic vote, it is also now assimilated into, it votes exactly the same way everyone else in the Upper East Side votes. You know what I'm saying? It votes their income bracket and education with zero concern for Jewish issues. And in fact, there are groups that put out polls about what Jews vote for, and they speak to those Jews. And the answer is no issues of Jewish concern whatsoever. So instead they say, it's a Jewish concern? Abortion rights is a Jewish concern. We need more abortion rights. And gay rights is a Jewish concern. In other words, every woke issue becomes, because what they've done is, they've migrated away from what Jewish meant to something completely, just whatever their income bracket is. We, on the other hand, the other Jewish vote, which is to say, not just Orthodox Jews, although yes, Orthodox Jews, but also Jews, by and large, whose families are from conservative communities. They've migrated either this generation or last generation from places like Iran, from Syria, from Middle Eastern countries. They tend to vote the way the Orthodox community tends to vote. They're very aware of Jewish issues. They care a tremendous amount what's going on in Israel. They care tremendous about anti-Semitism. And so they vote traditional values as well. That bloc is at this point probably 50% of the Jewish vote overall, although it's undercounted all the time. Just so you know that. That's the other. Polls are also misleading. So all I wanted was going to be a conscious of this. And I want to say now is because now in this election, after 2022, when the only vote that really mattered, you didn't see a big play, you didn't see the frum world say, hey, look at us. We changed the House of Representatives, which would have been a brilliant move to go down to Washington and take a victory and say, hey, by the way, not just Republicans, hey, Democrats, this is what happens when you go after what we care about. See, and we never do politics like that. All of us.
We don't because to a large extent, the Askanim,
right,
the advocates, the representatives, the activists don't want to embarrass their friends, don't want to embarrass their hosts, the people that they invite to receptions at their conventions. They need to, because those people are going to provide those organizations and the constituents of those organizations with funding for programs that you and I and Tzvi all agree are important to our community. But they're selling something that's even more important. Tzvi, how do we deal with that? I mean, in the Hasidic community, there are needs for social services that in the 5 towns where Jeff lives and in Passaic, Clifton, where I live, much less of an issue. What's the overall contribution? Like, how do you square that circle in a community like yours?
So even within the Orthodox vote, right? Even within the Hasidic votes, there are like almost like micro segments, right? Like universes. There are people that rely more, and there are people that rely less. But at the end of the day, we have to remember what our overall existence is, what our allegiance is to, right? And at what time, at what point, right, is taking the honey worth the sting that we're getting, right? So I think for a while, when there was like a little bit of balance in Washington, and maybe in New York when there was some sort of balance in the legislature, you were able to play that dance. But I think
people don't remember that it wasn't 100 years ago or 50 years ago that governors of New Jersey and governors of New York were Republicans, and they weren't necessarily particularly conservative Republicans, but they were Republicans, and they frequently had Republican legislatures to work with.
So I think if people stay focused on your I'll say tafkid, your mission, right? Your entire existence to be in this world for us is to build healthy families and to continue on our generations and create positive impact on the world. If we have our eyes on the prize as that, then if it comes to a situation where, hey, we might lose a couple of dollars, well, our ancestors gave up a lot more to stay Jewish than a couple of bucks. They sacrificed their lives. And right. I'll take it even a step further. You speak almost to anyone, no matter who they're anyone in America that is not Jewish, and you ask about their ancestors that came to America, why they came to America, they'll tell you about the challenges that they had back then, the sacrifices they made to be able to keep their religious liberties. So we have a lot more in common than the average non-Jew than we think. Just people do not realize it because we're so kind of in our bubble.
By the way, I could not agree with you more. And I'm going to talk to somebody who having worked on Capitol Hill, having been lobbied by the Jewish community, right? Because that's what I was doing when I was there, representing a senator, and people were lobbying me. This is something which it's painful to me how, who's in Washington right now? So the non-traditionalist movements that call themselves, different streams of Judaism, they come down there and they say, this is what the Torah stands for. The Torah stands for killing as many babies as you can. The Torah stands for that, men should marry men. And Torah, everything that we know the Torah doesn't stand for is what they say the Torah stands for. And here come the Orthodox Jews, and it's like, you know what? Politics is beneath us. We don't really want to talk about the Torah. We're just going to talk, just give us some money, we're going to walk away. And that's wrong. Because I see, for me, just because I wear a yarmulke and there is how people come to me and I can give you a million. One example. A Republican administration takes hold, and I get a phone call first week from somebody who is the number 2 in one of the departments. Hey, listen, we have this budget item for $25 million, and we're trying to figure out where it should go. And we figured, Jeff will tell us where it should go. Jeff, what's a good Jewish cause for it to go to? In other words, why are they coming to me? It's because there was never a moment in my life that I traded that off. And I understand that if you stand for a principle, then you will have power. Sometimes you'll be less power, some more. If you stand for nothing other than who's going to show up and have a photo of my schwitz wall and who's going to show up and be in the dais at a fundraiser, you will never have any power whatsoever. What they call access is not access. What they call access, it's the exact opposite. It's weakness.
Yep. And one thing I can add to that, like a lot of people ask me, like, see, what do you do when you go to Albany? Like, what do you do when you go to DC? And I say, I just talk. I make people aware of, the things that bother us, and I try to find commonality between us. And at the end of the day, I realize that when I'm in conversations about Jewish values and different things, like all I need to do is to quote things straight from the Torah. If I want to go a little bit deep, I go to a little bit of Rashi, and I'm good. It's not rocket science. People don't understand that at the end of the day, the human psyche is very, very simple. Politics is more of a human connection and just understanding of one each other and trying to find common ground to move things forward. At the end of the day, we're all humans and we all want the same thing.
Well, also, let's talk about power politics. Okay, let's give an example. Let's take one of the most famous lobbies, and it's one that Tzvi knows well, I know well. It's about the gun lobby, okay? So you will never find a situation where the gun lobby will give up on gun rights in order to say, hey, look, we have a photo op with a legislator, or look, we're more bipartisan. It's like, that's not how this works. This, or abortions. We're not going to give up on our core issue for existence in order to get a photo op, in order to claim bipartisanship. So, it's all weakness masquerading as power. There's some videos making the rounds, and they're very vulgar and they're very coarse, but they're union leaders who have been very disappointed by the Democrats. Again, they took them for granted, right? And they're talking about their meetings that they've had with leading Democrats and the directness of which is, hey, you want our vote? And again, there's a lot of 4-letter words they're using, but what are you going to do for us? Show us what you're going to do for us. Well, let me tell you something. The Frum community is now in a position, should be now in a position. 2022 is an outlier. It happened and no one made noise about it. If it happens again in 2024, where these seats stay Republican, and even though who knows what it's going to look like, maybe it's a bigger victory margin, smaller margin, but if these seats stay Republican, the Democrats have just learned the message. If you try to damage parental rights in Jewish education or in religious education generally, you will lose. You will lose control not of these seats, but of the House of Representatives. And if we want to have, I agree 100% with the idealism of this. I believe that if we focus only and exclusively on how can we be Mekadesh Shem Shemayim, how do we make Kiddush Hashem now, because honestly, no senator, no president decides how many years of life or dollars any Jew or Jewish institution has. That comes from God. But fine, if we work through Derech HaTeva, we work through what looks like nature to us, what's our job? Our job is to make a proper style, to make and what do we? And that has to be within the boundaries of Jewish values, of Torah values. You cannot sacrifice them. And I am saying, I've seen this time after time. It comes back to our benefit in this world. And if we give up, we have this moment now. If we show that we are staying strong and we're not going to give in to them because they're going to offer us a few bucks, it will be more money down the road for us, more power down the road for us, for standing firm for our values. If we give up, we have nothing.
And the great news is that we can actually make the argument, and it's a great argument because it's true and it's very compelling, that not only will it result in an improvement in the lot of the Jews in America, it will result in an improvement in the lot of America. Every American benefits from parental choice, from fundamental morality. All the things that we want for us, we want for the rest of our fellow Americans.
Look, the founding fathers built this country. They looked at the Bible, okay? And so obviously we may read certain things differently, but core values of biblical values, a conservative Christian society, which still exists in some pockets of America, you see very little anti-Semitism. That's one thing. And you see respectful kids. You see, you see normalcy. You see things that, and yes, we want the same thing. We've had to survive in a more hostile environment, and we have so much that we could bring to them and help them. And actually, Tzvi and I are involved in such a project where people came to us, Christians came to us, were looking for some, well, they came to me looking for some guidance, and every answer I gave them, they said, well, how do you know to do this? And because that's how we've survived. And now that you're a minority in this culture, here's how you could survive, but you can make it happen for the whole country because you have the numbers.
But it takes courage. You know, we are, if you look at the overall picture, the amount of noise that is coming from the media, from the left, and you know, people might feel lost, and it's hard to speak up. But at the end of the day, this is what it means to be Am Lagoyim. It means to be the light in the nation when it's dark, and you know, you can't see, you're scared, you're gonna trip, you're gonna fall. Take one step at a time, speak up, and you realize the more you speak up, the more you talk sense, the more people are gonna thank you. It's gonna give you encouragement, and you'll be able to move on and carry on.
I don't think any of us I wasn't being overtly partisan in this. I mean, I see all the organizations are saying who to vote for, not to vote for. It's obviously critical to vote, and I will say this: this is a good message for any religious American. And the truth is, even people in America who don't think of themselves as particularly believing Christians, right? Their baseline normality until very recently is still drawn from the same font, still drawn from the same biblical set of right and wrong. Okay, and that's what's under attack now from this, you know, progressive / jihadist alliance that's some weird way of gotten together and are attacking all of us. And yes, obviously Jews are visibly on the front lines of this. And yes, the more visibly Jewish that you are, the more you're likely to be abused and hurt for it. But the answer to me for our community and our community is what Tzvi just said: vote your values, do so in an unafraid way, and in particular. We do have this moment now for the Frum community, for the, you know, to once again show that what happened last time was not an outlier, and that we're not going to tolerate this anymore, and we are going to stand for what we believe. In that case, and in this case again, it should be the freedom to educate our children in the ways of our fathers.
Yep,
that's a wrap.